Hi folks, we have another Flux tutorial today. Today's tutorial is a little bit different because it is about develop. No, we're not doing that. Today's tutorial is going to specifically show you how to set up development environments for three projects that are fairly big. One that I'm a little biased towards. So we're going to look at flux-core, which is not surprisingly the core of Flux. We've talked about this in some of the other tutorials. Flux-sched, our awesome scheduler, also known as Fluxion, and the project that is near and dear to my heart, the Flux operator. So we'll be bringing up a kind cluster today. So without further ado, let me share my screen. Share the entire thing. Okay, so what you are hopefully looking at here, I wanted to just briefly introduce you to VS Code if you haven't seen it. And if you haven't, it's okay. I actually didn't start using VS Code until the end of 2022. And when I discovered it, oh boy, did it rock my world. I did not know that there were things like, discovering imports and auto completion and looking at function signatures. It was mwah, chef's kiss. So let's start in our terminal. What we're going to do first is we are going to go to temp where we put all of our, things that we're going to throw away eventually, and we're going to git clone flux-core. So all of our projects are under the Flux framework GitHub organization. And so first we're going to start with flux-core. So let's clone flux-core. Receiving the objects. I always imagine like a stream of like papers and books from like Beauty and the Beast or something like that. Go into flux-core and open VSCode, the command line operation on Linux. I'm actually not sure about Mac as code, so usually do just code like that. And then it opens. So if you've never used VS Code before, we are going to be using something called a dev container. And I'll actually show you this outside of here so you can sniff, aside from VS Code telling you like, hey, yo dog, there's a dev container here. You want to open it? And you just click yes. You can tell when a repository has a developer container because it has this dev container folder. In it, you'll find the dev container.json, which usually has metadata about it, plugins to install or extensions, etc. And of course, the Docker file to build. We're not going to get into strategies for Docker files, although I'd be happy to talk about that if someone is interested. There's specific things you want to do to make sure that your UID is the same, for example. Instead, we are going to just go in and we're going to click, let's see, reopen a container. Now I'll tell you, if you miss this little button here, or for some reason it doesn't show up, you can go to View, Command Palette, and then search for dev containers, rebuild, and reopen a container. And actually, let's just click this one, okay? And so the reason that we want to do this is because setting up a development environment, whether it's flux-core, flux-sched, doesn't matter. There's a lot of dependencies, and it's just so much easier to spin up the container. So I cheated a little bit. This container was already built, so like ready to go. When it's done, this is basically what you see. It'll say press any key, so you press a key. Okay, so we are now, who am I? The existential question that we ask VS Code. That seems like not the right entity to ask. Alrighty, so let's close this. So we have that extension installed. We are in flux-core now. So what do we want to do first? Well, we want to look around. You'll notice autogen.shell. Smells like autotools. So the first thing we're going to do is run autogen.shell. It's going to do its thing, usually tell you if when you have libtoolize missing, which I seem to have missing quite more often than I'd like to admit. Now configure. The thing that people are most used to typing is prefix equals user. And so, yeah, we could type that, but I want to encourage you. This is something that actually Sonnet taught. Configure files have so much information when you ask them for help. And so let me just kind of make this a little bit larger. And so when you look at configure help, what's interesting for flux-core is really this set of stuff up here. So you can control, for example, this local state directory, the run state directory, to include the run. And so these are things that if you're installing flux-core actually on your system, you will probably care about. There's also kind of other things to enable or disable. So for example, with Flux, something you might care about is caliper. So where's caliper? It's going to be somewhere in here. Or yep, there it is. So the val grind, caliper, there's all these extra things you might be interested in that when you just look at the configure help, they will tell you, okay? We're just going to be boring though. We're going to say prefix equals user, do your thing, Flux. Okay, so it checks all these things, and then we're gonna, everyone knows what to type next. Side note, does anyone remember the first time that you ever built software with make, like what it felt like? I actually do remember. So, okay, now we're going to type make. It's going to do its little make thing. While it is making, we are going to clone flux-sched. So again, GitHub. Would you like a GitHub? Like, that was a great typo. Okay, github.com, flux framework, and then flux-sched, also known as fluxion. I'm saying this a lot repeatedly on purpose because when I first joined the lab and there were all these different names for flux. So for flux-sched, there's flux-sched, there's fluxion. The Kubernetes scheduler plugin is named Fluent. It was just like too many things. And so I understand that it can get confusing. I can still get confused with flux names sometimes. So I'm just saying this to be explicit. So let's live dangerously. Let's see how our system is doing with HTOP. Not too bad, not too bad. We're just going to open another VSCode so that we can get started on flux-sched too. So same deal as before. It's probably going to ask us, would you like to reopen in the container? You know, this time, let's just click the button because the button is kind of nice. It reopens in the container. Brrr. Press and close any key. Yes, yes. Yeah, so you can, we're not going to do this in this talk, but you can configure your cmake options if you want to. Let's go back to the terminal, press the key. So sometimes the terminal doesn't work. And so to fix that, you do that, and then it's going to be broken still. But you do it one more time. There it is. Don't ask me why. It just is like that. Okay, so the interesting thing about flux-sched also used to be autotools, but it is not anymore. So if you absolutely forget what I'm about to show you, the easiest thing to do is actually just look at the README. And we have instructions here. Actually, several ways to do the same thing. What I like to do is still to run. So if you look at the configure script, this is actually kind of an imposter because it's doing cmake things. Okay, so you can still run configure, and does it accept a prefix? I actually don't remember this. We'll just try it. And it's going to do cmake things and be like, okay, and then you can actually just type make. And if I was living dangerously, should I live dangerously? Yeah, let's live dangerously. Let's do make J4. I never do this on my machine because I normally have like 1,000 browser tabs and like Slack and everything wrong going. Okay, so let's, while that's going. So anyway, you'll see that this is a cmake build system. Looks like our flux-core is still going. Who's gonna win? It's the race of the fluxes, but it's not really fair because I gave one a J value that was slightly larger. So while that's going, let's clone another project. This time we're just gonna take the history. We're gonna clone the flux operator. So by the way, the mascot of the flux operator is like a gopher with like a red mohawk. He's really, really cool, which I do because I'm not really cool. So I have to make my code guys pretty cool. So we're also going to open code, VSCode. Now the difference here is that we're not going to be using a dev container, and I'll tell you why in a second. Oh, who's winning? Who's winning? The race is on. Oh, flux-core. Flux-core is the winner. Okay, so now we can do sudo make install. So I forget, do we have flux now? Oh, we do. So here's the thing with flux-sched, fluxion is sort of the advanced scheduler. Flux itself comes with its own schedule called sched-simple, which actually you can fall back to if you want a higher throughput, but it's missing a lot of the niceties of fluxion, which is why we typically use fluxion. But the point I want to make is that you can use flux-core without flux-sched. And so let's start an instance. So we'll do flux start test size equals 4. We're in the instance, we can do flux resource list. There you go. So like if you were just developing with flux-core specifically, to summarize, you clone it, you open up the environment in VSCode. It is an autotool setup. So you're going to autogen, configure, make, sudo make install. You then can make changes to your code. You can start an instance and test it out. You also can run make test. I don't think, is that make check? There it is. So I don't know if this is actually going to finish. This test suite takes a while, but this is how to run the tests in flux-core. Let's check on Mr. Fluxion. Fluxion is dead. So Fluxion, the same deal. I think this one's make test. There we go. I knew one of them was make test. It just wasn't flux-core. So Fluxion also has its same test. So to summarize, with Fluxion is a cmake project. You actually could do the standard make directory build, cd build, cmake ... /, and then make. But you can also do a configure with a prefix and then just type make. You can also open the README and see these two things. So that's the high level, how to get started developing with flux-core and flux-sched. We're going to have other tutorials that actually show you details into that. I wanted to just show you how to bring up this environment. So that concludes our developer environments tutorial for flux-core and flux-sched. Again, both are in VSCode, and you need the dev containers extension, which is very easy to install. I was originally going to also include the flux operator in this tutorial, but we've already talked enough, so I'm going to put that in a different video. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.